This is the second part of the tutorial on shading the figure. The first part of my tutorial dealt with something called light logic. If you haven't done so, please go look at it so that you'll have some idea what I'm talking about when I'm shading the actual model. I've saved this time by mostly doing the line drawing. I started off with the armature, the simple geometric forms, then I started going into my line. Look at my rules of line tutorial if you need to get more information on how I was making decisions as far as thick and thin lines. I'm ready to shade. The next step is to get rid of my construction. So I've got lots of under drawing here. I've tried to keep it light. Didn't always succeed. And really, actually in most cases, I'm not even going to do this because I'm working lightly enough that really the armature is not going to get in the way. Okay, so I'm going to clean up my selection a little bit, clean up the drawing a little bit. Now I'm going to start shading. The very first thing I do is find my light breaks, find the shape of the light break. So if you guys remember, the light break is the border between my shadows and my lights. On a sphere, it's going to run like this. On a complex form, it's going to run all over the place. So look for where it goes from light into dark. On this model, we have a spherical shape here. Light is coming probably slightly from the front, but mostly from the side. We have a light break that runs like this. Because I'm dealing with a body shadow, I want to make sure that I use a fuzzy line to indicate the separation. So focus on the shape of the light break. Be very specific about it. Do not simplify the light break. And also pay attention to what kind of shadow you are drawing. Where you have a body shadow, the edges need to be soft. Use a fuzzy line. So all of this is now body shadow. Okay, so here we have a breast. By the way, any line, any detail on the inside of the form, do not use line. Use a fuzzy edge. So here we have a body shadow. We have another body shadow running here, like this. Then things start to fade out a little bit, but we have a body shadow running across the abdomen. Then it goes down like this way, then runs down this way. Then we have a body shadow here, and a little cast shadow that runs this way. This entire part of the arm is in shadow. We're not going to bother shading the face, though we might get to it. Let's see. Alright, what about the leg? Well, we have a body shadow that runs this way, like this. It runs across this way. Again, use a soft edge. Do not put a sharp line there. Put a sharp line there, you're not going to be able to erase it, and it's always going to look like you have a blocky figure. Alright, so it goes down, then around this way, and then on this side, very clearly you can see that we have a cast shadow running this way, like this, running down this way, like this, and then going in this way. If you have a cast shadows have sharp edges. Use a sharper line to indicate the shape of the cast shadow. So, drawing, once again, is a process of breaking things down into simple steps. All I'm thinking about right now, exclusively, is the shape of my cast shadow, the shape of my light breaks, and whether I'm looking at a body shadow or a cast shadow. So literally, the only thing happening right now in my head is this. Fuzzy, 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 sharp, 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 sharp. Right? You have 50% chance of getting it right. Either it's a body shadow, in which case it has a soft edge, or a cast shadow, it has a sharp edge. Okay. I found my light breaks. I was specific about what kind of shadow I was looking at. The next step is to shade everything you see as shadow a little tiny bit. I'm using a Wolf's Carbon pencil. I believe this is a 4B. I would start off with your very lightest charcoal, so let's say the equivalent of HB or a medium. To control the pressure, hold the pencil way back like this. Rest your finger against a knuckle and start applying a little bit of value. Now, where you're shading a body shadow, I'm going to immediately shade slightly past my light break in order to get the halftone, that slight fuzzy edge. Right now, really, the main job is to separate my shadows from my lights. That's all I'm doing right now. This is my only task. Again, I'm always breaking things down into simple steps. Always, always, always. I'm focusing on the shadows only. And once again, paying attention to whether I'm dealing with a body shadow, in which case I'm going to shade slightly past the light break. Ever so slightly past the light break. Ever so slightly past the light break. Or a cast shadow, in which case you're going to shade all the way up to the edge. The key to control is holding your pencil way back like this. I'm going to be really patient. There are faster techniques. Keep your strokes, for right now, one directional. Later on we might talk about cross contour, cross hatching, that kind of stuff. For right now, just keep your shading even. Be patient. Try to get smooth shading. And for right now, I don't want you using your blending stumps. Don't blend. Really important as part of your training as artists, as draftsmen, to learn how to control the pressure of your pencil, to be able to create a soft transition without smearing, without using your thumbs, your chamois, your blending stumps. In order to do that, you need to hold your pencil way back like this and be very, very patient with yourself. Okay, I've shaded the entire figure down. I've separated my shadows from my lights. I was specific, except for here, where I didn't. I was specific about what kind of shadow I was looking at. The next step is to look in the body shadow, everywhere you see body shadow, and look for the other two components. So if you remember, body shadows have three components. We've got fuzzy edges, which we already have. Fuzzy edges. And then we're looking for core shadows. So that's going to be a slightly darker value that runs along the light break, like this. And what else? Reflected lights. Core shadows. Reflected lights. Alright, so everywhere there's a core shadow, there will necessarily be these two other components. On this particular figure, and probably this is why I chose it, by the way, there's a cast shadow here, I forgot about it. There are very strong, clear core shadows and reflected lights. When you guys are looking for models to draw, find ones that are very clearly lit. The best lighting conditions are slightly from the top, slightly from the side, and then you want to make sure the light source is sharp enough so that you see distinctions between the different kinds of shadows. So in the New Master Academy database, there's a variety of models. Some are lit with a slightly more diffuse light, which creates soft cast shadows. You don't want that. You want to find something with sharper cast shadows. Not that diffusion in light sources is bad. In fact, sometimes it's good. Sometimes when the cast shadows are too sharp, they tend to eat into the form a little bit. The second problem with some of the New Master Academy database is that some of the models have shadows that are so dark they fall through. There's no reflected light at all. They end up looking really dark, really flat. Again, the photography already simplifies the values in the darker values, in the darker regions. You want to find images where you can see core shadows and reflected lights, not something where the core and cast shadow, where the shadow gets entirely lost, where it just starts kind of looking very even and dark. And some of the images in the New Master Academy do that. Okay, so everywhere there's a core shadow, we have a cylindrical shape. Everywhere there's a body shadow, excuse me, we have a core. And you will see, like magic, I hope, sort of like magic, that once I've installed the core shadow, that our figure starts taking on greater and greater three-dimensionality. Because I've checked off the other two boxes. Essentially, if I make the core shadow darker, my reflected light happens automatically. Right? We already start having a lighter value. Now, there might be some places where it goes lighter, but we're not going to be able to tell until we work on the lighter part of the model a little tiny bit. Work in layers. Let the pencil build up little by little by little, like this. Okay. If you feel like you start losing the halftone, put it back in. Alright, so what I'm doing now is putting in my core shadows. We've dealt with the body shadows. Now let's deal with the three properties of cast shadow. So cast shadows have sharp edges. This is true. That fuzz out. That get a little bit fuzzier. Get a little bit softer as they move from the casting object. So if you remember, that should be a 1, 2, 3. Cast shadows are sharp. Cast shadows get fuzzier. And the cast shadows are darker at the point of origin, and they tend to get a little bit lighter as they move away. So they get lighter. So I'm going to look at all the cast shadows and think about where they're really sharp. It's going really sharp here. Where they're dark, it's going really dark here. By the way, resist the urge to make your cast shadows completely black, because they're going to turn into tunnels. Be careful. Don't make them the same value, don't make them the same edge. So I can see it's getting a little bit fuzzier here. Cast shadow darkest here, sharpest here, and then you can see on this side it starts sharper here, and then will fuzz out a little bit. There are obviously faster ways of shading, but for the sake of your training, I want all of you to do this. Okay, I'm going to work on this a little bit more. I'm going to get my cast shadows and my core shadows, my components a little bit darker, and then in the second part of the tutorial, we'll deal with the lighter part of the model. Okay, so we worked on the shadows a little bit. I believe we achieved some degree of three-dimensionality. We're missing details in the shadows, of course. But before we start putting in details and really refining the darker parts of the composition, our model, let's switch to the lights and get some of the components of the lights. So if you remember, in the light we also have three properties. We have a highlight. Number 2, we have the light, which is everything that's darker than the highlight, going from the lightest light all the way to not quite halftone, but almost halftone. So the light, which is again a range of values, and then we have halftone. So the next step is to start with the lights and think about where the halftones are. Where are halftones? Halftones are where the forms are at approximately 90 degrees to the light source. So if we have a bird's eye view, like this, here's the light source going this way, fanning out. This entire part is going to be in light. This part's going to be in shadow. Your halftone is going to be here. Well, technically probably right about here, right? Where only half the light source is hitting, only half the light is hitting the plane. So, by thinking through that, by thinking about where the planes of the body are at 90 degrees, it's going to help you determine where the halftones are. So we have a spherical shape here. Light is coming from the top, slightly from the side. I noticed that this entire part of her hip is in halftone. This part's turning towards the light a little bit, and then we have a halftone here, like this. let's establish a little bit more halftone here. We have halftone here, like this, but also we have a spherical shape here. Light is hitting this way, and we have a halftone here underneath her rib cage. What I'm trying to do is make clear that there are spherical shapes here, and then we have a little halftone here. That's a separation between the external obliques and the rectus abdominis muscles, so her side and her abdomen. Okay, so this is going also into halftone here. The rib cage, it's turning away this way. Again, hold the pencil way back this way, work really light, and then here the breast is facing the light source a little bit. So besides just seeing it, it helps, once again, understanding exactly what you're seeing, what to look for. These things are so subtle and so complex that unless you know what to look for, you will miss it. Again, hold the pencil way back like this. Don't worry about the direction of the shading right now. Again, we're just focusing on value. Keep the strokes close together. If you start seeing a buildup of direction, just change the angle ever so slightly to prevent showing direction. Alright, let's build a little bit more of the halftone. So we have another little halftone here, like this. Going this way, like this. And then she has a very light skin tone, so there are a few highlights. If I'm going to spend maybe another few hours on this, I can separate the highlight from the light, but this is really enough just to find the halftones and maybe differentiate between a few different kinds of lights. So this is maybe slightly darker here. The shoulder has a highlight. That's really the only place other than parts of her face that have a little bit of a highlight going this way. There's a little halftone here, going like that. And actually, if you want to be really specific, the upper torso is more brightly lit than the lower torso, so I can do something like this, where the lower legs, the legs, are going a little bit more into halftone. Now, one thing will happen, once you've added the halftone, you realize that your shadows probably didn't go quite dark enough. So this is why it's really important to go back and forth. I shade a little bit, I get a little bit specific about the shadows, then I switch immediately to the lights, and add your halftones, so you can compare your shadows against your lights against your shadows, and then ultimately realize that your shadows need to go darker. So at this stage, now that I have the lighter values to compare the shadows to, I can start going darker in the shadows. At this step, I'm going to start putting in my darker contrast. So we've got some core shadows that go pretty dark here, like this. By the way, this model is complicated a little bit. We've got some kind of secondary light coming this way, which is casting a shadow back. So this model is not ideally lit, not perfectly lit. Better than some of the new Masters Academy models, but not perfect. We're not going to find perfect unless we take photos ourselves, I think. So we'll start going a little bit darker. There's some places where we see details in the shadows. Let's say the abdomen here. We have a little core shadow. Again, we have some kind of pretty strong reflected light, maybe even a secondary light here. So we're going to make that a little bit stronger. Again, be careful not to make your cast shadows super dark. No matter how dark the cast shadows are, they'll never be quite as dark as, let's say, the model's hair, right? Or her pupils. Leave room to go darker just in case you need to. By the way, you'll also find that once you shade it, that your line quality probably needs to be reinforced as well. So quite often at the beginning, without shading, it'll feel like the line quality is strong enough. You might need to adjust some of the lines to get them to pop. So the reflected light here might need to go a little bit softer. She has no belly button. I might want to put that in. So it's not Eve. What else can I tell you right now? Okay, there is a little bit of light hitting here, which I can erase out. Look, so far I have not used an eraser. Scout's honor, I promise I haven't. Other than to erase the armature at the beginning. However, you will need to make corrections. Let's make a deliberate mistake here. So I was telling you guys, please avoid making the cast shadows too dark. There's going to be a point where the cast shadow becomes so dark it turns into some kind of puncture. It starts punching in. How do you fix that? With your kneaded eraser. Instead of erasing, though, we're going to dab at the drawing. So take a little chickpea-sized piece and flatten it a little bit, and then just dab at the drawing. It's going to lift off a little bit of the pencil pigment and get you back to where you want to go. The same thing's going to happen with the core shadows, by the way. So if your core shadow starts looking like a groove as opposed to a core shadow, so right there, right, it just looks like a wound, right? You can always take your kneaded eraser and lift it up. I mean, look, this is shading basics. You guys should know this already. All right. What else can I tell you? I think that's it for now. I'm going to refine this drawing a little bit, take another photo, but I think for now, this shading demo is done.